Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today we'll provide another installation into our series on The Prince, written by Mr. Niccolo Machiavelli. In The Prince, he details all of these different tactics and strategies that tyrants to this day utilize in order to convince their citizens to surrender their liberty, to surrender their freedom. Understanding these tactics in and of itself helps defend against the subjugation of energetic and ambitious tyrants, which explains why the Calhoun School of Law is covering The Prince. So let's go ahead and jump on over to The Prince. We are going on to Chapter 4. If you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 3, I encourage you to do so because, like I was just saying, understanding all of these tactics and strategies, just knowing of them in and of itself, is one of the best deterrents to make sure tyrants don't utilize these ideas, utilize these tactics. So number 4 is titled Conquered by Alexander the Great. The kingdom of Darius did not rebel against his successors after his death. Why not? This is what Mr. Machiavelli says as to the explanation. Now that we've seen how difficult it is to hold on to recently acquired territory, some readers will be surprised to recall what happened when Alexander the Great conquered Asia in just a few years, then died very soon after his victory was complete. You would have thought the whole area would have rebelled, yet Alexander's successors held on to it, and the only trouble they had arose from their own personal ambitions and infighting. To explain this situation, let's start by remembering that all monarchies on record have been governed in one of two ways, either by a king and the servants he appoints as ministers to run his kingdom, or by a king and a number of barons who are not appointed by the king but hold their positions thanks to hereditary privilege. These barons have their own lands and their own subjects who recognize the barons as their masters and are naturally loyal to them. Where a state is governed by a king and his ministers, the king is more powerful since he is the only person in the state whom people recognize as superior. When they obey someone else, it is only because he's a minister or official, and they have no special loyalty to him. Example of these two forms of government in our times are Turkey and France. The whole of Turkey is governed by one ruler, or sultan. Everyone serves him. He divides his realm into provinces, or sanjaks, and sends administrators to run them, appointing and dismissing them as he sees fit. The King of France, on the other hand, is surrounded by any number of barons whose rights date back to ancient times, and who are acknowledged and loved by their subjects. Each baron has specific privileges which a king can only take away at his peril. Looking at these two kinds of states, it's clear that Turkey is hard to conquer, but once conquered, very easy to hold. France, on the other hand, will be somewhat easier to conquer, but very hard to hold. The reason why it's hard to conquer a country like Turkey is that there are no barons to invite you in, and you can't expect anyone to make your invasion easier by rebelling against the king. This follows naturally from the situation as described above. Since all subjects are the king's servants and indebted to him, it's hard to corrupt them. And even assuming you do manage to bribe someone, he's not likely to be much help because he can't bring any local people along with him. This, again, for the reasons I've explained. So, anyone attacking this kind of country has to reckon that he will find it united against him, and hence has to rely on his own armed forces rather than on any mutiny in enemy ranks. But once you have won and routed the enemy and made sure he can't rebuild his armies, then the only thing to worry about is the king and his family. Eliminate them, and no one else can threaten you, since no one commands the loyalty of the people. Just as before your victory, you couldn't look to any barons for help. So after it, there are none around to pose a threat. The opposite is true in countries run along French lines. Here you can make inroads easily enough, winning the support of a baron or two. There's always someone unhappy with the king and eager for change. Then these people are well placed to get you a foothold in the country and help you to victory. But afterwards, you're going to have all kinds of problems holding on to what you've won. Problems with the people who fought on your side, and problems with those who fought against you and lost. This time it won't be enough to eliminate the king's family, because there will always be barons ready to assume authority when circumstances swing their way, and since you can never give them everything they want and never eliminate them all, you'll lose the territory you took as soon as your enemies get an opportunity to rebel. If we go back now to the kingdom of Darius, we'll find that it was of the Turkish variety. So Alexander first had to defeat its entire army and get control of the country. But once he'd done that, and once Darius was dead, he was securely in command for the reasons cited above. And if his successors had been united, they could have run the region without any worries. In fact, the only trouble was the infighting they started themselves. But states organized the French way can never be held so easily. The frequent uprisings against Roman power in Spain, Gaul, and Greece, for example, were the result of those regions being internally divided into so many principalities. So long as people remembered their old loyalties to local lords, Rome was never in complete control. But once the power and permanence of empire had extinguished those loyalties, then Rome became the undisputed master of the region. In fact, when the Romans started fighting among themselves, each warring commander was able to bring the province he was running into the conflict on his side, since once the families of the old local rulers had been eliminated, the only authority people recognized was Rome's representative. When you take all this into account, it's really not surprising how easy it was for Alexander to hold Asia, nor how hard it was for many others, Pyrrhus, for example, to hold on to the territories they took. It wasn't a question of the abilities of each particular conqueror, but of the different kinds of state they had invaded. And that is all to be said in Chapter 4. If you have any questions about what was said in Chapter 4, questions about what was said in the preceding chapters, or maybe there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, go ahead and post those down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to equip you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions, post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and until I see y'all in the next lecture for the next topic, there we go. I bid you all farewell.